Welcome to the Sankey Sliding Center in Sochi, Russia. We're close to the Black Sea port of Sochi in the Alpine location for the 2014 Winter Olympic Games. And today is the start of the 9th and final World Cup racing weekend of the season. Well, hello everybody, I'm Martin Havens. Sitting alongside me is Canadian slider Melissa Hollingsworth. And Melissa, first time on a brand new track for everybody here. That's a whole new set of challenges.
It is, and it kind of gives us a little bit more of an even playing field with experience and whatnot. It's a really interesting track with uphill sections and a lot of G-force, and you know, the construction all the way around is really beautiful. It's completely covered, so weather will not be an issue. You can see here's the athletes starting, loading on the sled. This is difficult right now because the groove has run out and we have a really long start into that first corner, and we've been hitting that bottleneck, those walls on the side. So you might see some accidents happening here in this race. Going into corner 3, the speed starts to pick up. Here's corner 4, a bit of a snake corner. Now we start getting into some higher pressure, double oscillation 5, into an uphill section. Now this is new for us. And then corner 6, it drops away from us. There's also some straightaways here that are counting as corners. Now we're in 8, which isn't a corner, into 9, which can confuse some athletes. 10, a big right hand with 3 pressures, yet it's not a kreisel. Now we're in 11. The speed's picking up quite a bit. We're around 123 kilometers an hour at this point. Going into, what is this here? I'm almost lost now. 15 and 16. Yeah. All the pressures. Look at the athlete's head sucked down to the ice right there. It's quite bumpy as well as we're crossing the finish line.
Well, one thing you do notice particularly is this long in-run. There's like a double finish. You get to a plateau and then climb again into this massive finish house. Well, let's take a look at our start list. We've got 26 athletes in the field. All will go in the first heat and then cut down to 20 in the second. Martin Dukurs is our World Cup points leader. His brother Thomas is behind him. And it seems almost inevitable that Martins will take the Crystal Globe at the end of the season. 220 points for a win is not enough to put Dukurs in front. Thomas, that is, even if Martins does not win here. In fact, if he doesn't score a point, Thomas still can't catch him. The real interest will be whether Martins can win this race and claim the triple trophy. For victory in Eagles, in Koenigsee and here in Sochi, 100,000 euro is the potential prize if he does so. So a gold medal and a huge pot of gold waiting potentially for Martin Dukurs after the 2 final slides of the regular season. But Melissa Hollingsworth, here is the man who might be about to get a big payday, and with that man, oh no, that's not, that's the Japanese, with Alexander Tretiakov here on home soil. He's got to be the biggest threat.
Yeah, and Tretiakov just won world championships, so you know, this is another time that we're not used to seeing Martins on top, especially at a big event, world championships, coming into Alexander's home track, Sochi, the Olympics next year. There's a lot of focus and a lot of support on Tretiakov's side.
Well, let's take a look at the start list. Alexander Tretiakov will be the man who starts the competition. He will go off first, and he's the man with most experience here. The Russians have had pre-season sliding. End of last year, they were sliding on the track as well. A lot of the infrastructure is still coming together, but the track itself has been homologated last year. So he's going to be the man that sets the pace. Martin Dukurs goes off in 7th place. And actually, although the ice is fairly warm, just about 1 degree or so, it doesn't seem to be breaking down too much. So it should be a fairly even race between them.
I hope so. And in training, things have been separated by the hundredths of a second for the majority of the competitors, which is very surprising. Usually we're seeing gaps of tenths of a second between competitors. So I guess we're going to see what's going to be started all right now.
So this will give us perhaps a taste of what to expect in February 2014, but with an awful lot more noise surrounding this man. Alexander Tretiakov, the newly crowned world champion. And if he had any nerves, he certainly didn't show them earlier on. I was talking to him. First chance ever for a Russian athlete to have a World Cup race in his home country. He gets our race underway for the final race of the season, steering a long way down into the first corner. A new start record established here, 4.59 seconds. And Melissa, in training, the result has fairly much followed the start order, so it's going to be interesting to see how that works today.
It will, and obviously it's a new track. We have new track workers. Everybody's learning. Not only the athletes sliding down the track, also just how to maintain the track.
Well, a big high line there, sweeping through corner 7.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you want to do. You can easily come out and just tap the wall. Here's that 3 pressure corner in corner 10, heading into 11. It drops away from him now. This is that funny chicane, 12, 13 into 14. A big uphill section, and he hits and skids into 15.
Speed 128.6 kilometers an hour, 80 miles an hour, so it's still a very quick track. Losing speed because of the uphill, and he sets the new track record, 57.07. Well, we may yet see that broken a few more times before this race is over. Who can tell?
Those are highest speeds that we've seen this week in training. I think the men were approaching maybe just over 127 kilometers an hour. You can see he's really high in 7 there. Now he's coming out of 14. This shot just bumps the wall there on his left-hand side. Runners are pointed the wrong direction. His body's trying to compensate for that skid.
Well, they're out of 14. You climb in 15. You go over the track as it comes. It folds in amongst underneath itself to come back up to the finish. So Alexander Tretiakov has set the benchmark. Now it's time for everybody else to see what they can achieve on this Olympic track. Thomas Dukurs is our second starter, the older of the 2 Latvian Dukurs brothers, 31 years old. Oh, comes out of the spur, but has he broken the time he mean to start? No, he's got 12 seconds, 10 seconds, 9, Well, 11 seconds still on the clock in a far distance, you can see now. That is remarkable composure. You very rarely see that. The last man who did that was a couple of years ago, Frank Rommel. Can he get a good steer into the first corner? 4.77.
Wow. Now we're going to have to see how Thomas can remain quiet on his sled. And this track is new to him, too. It's not something that he's going to be able to just rely on all that experience. He's going to have to rely on his instincts of exactly what to do to get down this track now with that little bit of a setback at the top.
Well, pretty much anywhere else you go to, unless you're looking at rookie sliders, they will have had dozens of trips down this track. Nobody, apart from the Russians, is in that position at the moment. 127.5, 128.6 was the speed of Tretiakov, so he's been about a kilometre an hour down all the way through. If he avoids the problem of 14 here, and he does, he could close on the leader. 127.7 for Tretiakov. 128. He's closing a little. He's still in the red, but 4,300's back. That's perhaps not as bad as might have been anticipated.
It looked very clean. There was barely any mistakes there, but, you know, he might have lost maybe about a tenth of a second at the top of the track.
But he was 1,800ths of a second slower in the start alone.
So he chose to use the right groove. He's pushing over top of it. I'm really quite surprised that he came out of the groove. The groove should be immaculate right now with only the second starter on that block.
Well, maybe the grooves aren't quite as deep as they might be. There's Thomas. Well, you can either laugh about it or cry, and he's not the crying type, so you've got to shrug it off and get going again. But that is a salient warning now, Melissa Hollingsworth, for everybody else to be careful of what you're doing. Frank Rommel in that same right-hand groove, and again, pushing with his left hand. One of the factors here about this start is trying to judge how far to run it.
Yes, how far, and obviously it's a bit of a strategy of which groove to use because we've been having such problems when we've been exiting the groove in training. So obviously these sliders have been watching the forerunners to find out which way it has been pulling them, which is the safest to get into corner one clean. Frank's been battling a back injury. He actually didn't slide yesterday, the final day of OT. He's pretty sore when I saw him at the hotel yesterday, but this morning he had a great attitude and he was going to do his absolute best.
Well, 4,800's back. 127.9, better than Dukurs, but still better part of a kilometre an hour down on Tretiakov, the leader.
Comes out of 14 clean, but a little bit early into 15, you can see his body kind of got buckled from that hump going into that uphill section. It's a little tricky here when the ice is chattering underneath of you to make sure that you're driving the right lines.
Better speed again than the Russian, 57.65. He stops the clocks in third place, 1500s behind Thomas Dukurs. And as ever with Frank, a little behind at the start, finding pace further down the track. Look at, actually, Joey, he is not quite straight as he stands up there. He's looking a little bit ginger.
Yeah, he's really sore. Loads on his sled. As he comes out of the groove, watch his body language. He's going to be trying to avoid his right-hand wall. And then I think he overcompensates a little bit because you can see his body pulling back to the other side. Now, he didn't hit the wall like Tretiakov right here, but he goes too early into corner 15, and watch his face and his body just get sucked down to the ice. Big direction change.
Well, one thing a lot of athletes have talked about is the chin piece chattering on the ice. Eric Nielsen particularly was showing me the cracks in the front of his helmet yesterday. Let's see what this Canadian can produce. Turned 32 January 20th.
Oh, he came close to hitting that right wall. 476 though, he's just ahead of Dukurs.
It's a really long, really wide starting straight, and then that bottleneck comes in from both sides. There is no margin for error.
And if you hit the wall there, that's it. Your race would be done.
Again, nobody yet has had the speed of Alexander Tretiakov at the start. And nobody has been able to close on him. Eric 3500's back already as he climbs high through corner 5.
You can just see his body. He's working quite a bit. He's in unknown territory as opposed to Tretiakov, where he was letting it fly and it was a lot smoother, but everybody's learning right now, all for next year.
Well, Tretiakov down there had 128 kilometers an hour. Eric 126.2, still losing ground.
You can hear his face rattling off the ice. That's how much pressure there is down the finish corners.
He came off the ice yesterday and he said it was like just being constantly punched in the chin all the way down. And it's not like he's a fading violet. He's a big, strong guy.
Sometimes he wants the punch back, knowing Eric. Now, everybody has used that right groove and must be putting the athletes into corner 1 the best. But again, Eric's struggling. He starts to move. The runners are skidding a little bit. The legs are out to try and balance himself. He almost hits that right-hand wall.
So Eric Nielsen lying in 4th position. Next up, we have the USA's John Daly, 27-year-old former decathlete from the University of Plattsburgh in New York State. Let's see what he's got. Well, one of John's great strengths always used to be his electrifying starting. He could really use some of that here, but gets a big skid out of that groove.
Wow, and it looked like he let go of the sled and his arms came out a little bit. He was Cresta style almost, trying to manipulate the sled to get into corner 1 without that hit.
And he's paid for it in terms of speed as well.
Yeah, Daly has been sliding really well in training this week. The Americans have been very strong as a program this week, working well together. And have to have a look at his lines, and maybe this extra speed might be something a little unknown for the majority of the sliders today.
Into corner 7. Big double pressure corner. 127.7 is the second best speed we've seen.
Oh, that's the first hit we've seen going into 14. He comes out clean though.
Well, there are so many different opportunities to get it wrong on this track.
There really are, and it's tough to tell when you have things. Wow, a 57.60 up into 3rd. That's very impressive considering really how messy the run was. Great job, John.
Well, again, you know, this may end up being a track where, like Eagles, clinical precision is your greatest ally. But at the moment, when everybody's still scrambling, apart from Tretiakov, maybe wild is fast.
Again, here's the trouble with the grooves. Look at his hands. He just wasn't set straight, and the sled veers off to the right immediately, working really hard. Has a little bit too much height coming out here. He's going to bump the wall. This is that chicane, 12-13, headed into 14, but it sets him up with that early entrance into 14, which helped him on the exit. He didn't brush the wall like Tretiakov.
So John Daly and his sled being weighed down at the bottom in this fabulous finish area. As up at the top of the track, we have Alexander Krökel of Germany, former junior world champion. Krökel, the 2011 junior world champion from the Oberhof track. Still just 22 years old.
Everybody's still using the right groove. Imagine what the left groove's doing. I haven't seen one person in. It was a very severe angle, but thankfully he got a hold of it going into corner one.
Wow, good speed, 50.0. We saw 51 from Alexander Tretiakov, but he is the second quickest man into that corner.
Sometimes the start times aren't the most important, but that velocity as you head into that first corner is exactly what's going to help accelerate you all the way down the track.
But again, by the second trap, he is 32 hundredths back. Tretiakov was just blasting out of the start. Well, there's at least half a dozen sets of timing eyes down that first 50 meters, and clearly the Russians in training are using those to work out where maximum velocity comes from each of their athletes, and that seems to be really helping.
Krökel looks like he's getting a little bit more comfortable as he's headed through this lower portion of the track as opposed to the top part.
127.5 was good speed down towards the bottom, 79 miles an hour, but Tretiakov, the only man, up to 80. Well, fifth place for Alexander Krökel, 3/4 of a second back from the leader.
Again, this is the focus, it seems like, on all of our replays. That groove, watching him come out, veering to his right, his leg coming out to try and use as a rudder to get over. That was a close call.
It is Alexander Tretiakov of Russia who leads this race with our first 6 athletes down, all safely. Our World Cup leader is Martins Dukurs of Latvia, wearing the yellow vest, and perhaps with a chance now to have one of the biggest paydays that this sport has ever seen, financially at least. If he wins here, he wins 100,000 euro for the FIBT Triple Trophy and a new start record. He is not going to be beaten like he was in 4 runs in St. Moritz for the World Championship title by Alexander Tretiakov, if he can do anything to stop it.
Wow, do I ever have goosebumps right now. A start record on the Sochi track by Martins with a groove that is so shaky. So impressive, but we're always impressed by Superman. 12
hundredths of a second up. Now, it's not about one run. He's got to beat Tretiakov on home ice twice. 18 hundredths, the gap is growing. And he makes this look like he's had hundreds of trips down here. 127.7. Tretiakov was 128.6. The gap will come down. But will he make the mistake out of 14 that Tretiakov did? No.
No, he's having great lines. A little bit late into 16. He's going to have some oscillations, but it's not hurting him at all. 128.1 kilometers an hour.
Perfect. He gets the new track record, 56.90. That is the lead for Martins Dukurs of Latvia. Well, pretty much it was always going to boil down to these 2 guys, Mel. Melissa, you know, sitting here with me watching what we expected, Dukurs versus Tretiakov.
Yeah, and in training, Tretiakov was half a second at least ahead of Dukurs. Yes, he was playing around with his start a little bit, trying to learn the track, but still, Tretiakov was here setting the pace, showing that he had the confidence that this is his home track, and Martins just took that away from him on run 1.
Well, cometh the hour, cometh the man. Let's see what else is going to excite us in this first of 2 heats here in this final World Cup race of the season. Former world champion Kristen Bromley, his brother Richard, holds the Bromley Tech sled at the top of the ice for him. 8th of our 26 starters.
He's the first one that we're seeing use that left-hand groove. It'll be interesting to see what's going to happen when he leaves the spur.
Well, let's hope he doesn't leave the spur unintentionally early, as we saw with Thomas Dukurs blasting off from the top of the track. The penultimate start of the season, just almost over-rotated onto the sled, but gets a good run down into the first corner.
That's the cleanest that we've seen anybody go into the first corner with minimal effort. And I know Kristen is much more comfortable pushing in that groove, just having that runner in that groove running over top of that part of the saddle. So he must have just decided that I'm more comfortable with this and I'll make it work.
Started 0.2 of a second slower than Alexander Tretiakov and Martins Dukurs. And as a result, he is now 0.4 behind. And the gap continues to grow. For Kristen, this is all about experimentation. Winning this race is not important. Learning in this race to try and have a chance of an Olympic medal in a year from now, that's what it's all about.
It's just some mini skids that he's happening, and you're actually seeing him create with him moving his legs around a little bit, and that's just not being as familiar with the track.
I was talking to Shelley Rudman, his partner, in the elevator coming down to the track today, and she was saying, still, okay, I think I've got it down to about corner 8, and after that I'm going to busk it. And, you know, there's a lot of that, Melissa. You know, nobody really knows this track in the field, apart from maybe the Russians.
Yeah, and see, Kristen used that left groove, but a bit of mishap on the load. It looked quite rough, and that will hurt some velocity, but he goes pretty straight into corner 1.
Well, still 8th place, 1.23 seconds back from the leader. And the first two separated by 1700ths. Third place is 6/10 back, so lots of room for manoeuvre. John Montgomery of Canada, then, our reigning Olympic champion, and this is where he will come to defend his title in just under 360 days. Melissa Hollingsworth, there's a lot of pressure in his next 12 months, right?
I don't know if we can really say it's pressure, but you know, that's what you put on yourself. It's obviously desire, and he's been working extremely hard on his start and obviously building his own sled. He's going to put everything out on that table to do his absolute best to repeat Olympic champion.
Well, he has progressively got quicker and quicker as the season has gone on since he has stuck with this one development of the sled. Nice high line in 7. You're right up by the woodwork there.
Yeah, and that prevents him from hitting the right wall going into corner 9. Here's that 3 pressure corner 10 up into 11. Let's see if he can keep off that. Oh, a bit of a skid going into corner 14 and kind of ping-ponging off those walls.
Maybe a little bit of rescue steering going on. 6th place at the moment of a 3rd fastest start, but the speed, 126. It's the 2nd slowest we've seen at the bottom, 57.8 slide. Well, that puts him in 6th position at the moment. So Martin Dukurs and Alexander Tretiakov, the top 2, separated by a few hundredths of a second.
You can see how much pressure there was. His head was buried, and then it pops up as he comes, and he's trying to navigate his way going into 14. He just wants to squeak his sled over a little bit, but kicks it into his sled. Has to steer down pretty hard there so he avoids hitting on that left-hand wall. He's not that happy. He was training great. So we'll expect him to clean it up for the 2nd run.
10th of our 26 starters is Christopher Grothair of Germany, the reigning junior world champion. He was runner-up 2 years ago and claimed the title in Eagles, Austria in December 2012. He's already been a regular in every World Cup race this season and shown once again how much talent there is. Bronze medal in Winterberg, first race in Germany this year.
479, he handles the exit of the spur very well going into corner 1. And the German program is so deep. In training, you're always seeing ranks up in the top 6 amongst the 3 men, the highest speeds, always somebody that you always want to be able to learn from.
0.6 of a second is the deficit to our race leader, Martin Dukurs. 127.7, that's pretty good speed. We've had a whole host of athletes around that, except for the fastest 2, and a big skid there, and you really saw him lose his form momentarily as he controlled that.
That's the difficult thing about this track with those uphill sections. When you come out of corners, it's sort of a false pressure release. You still have pressure as you're heading uphill.
He still had really good speed at the bottom, despite that big skid. 57.7 leaves him in 6th position. So our first 10 athletes are down, the top 10 in our World Cup rankings.
Right here, he just drops out his back end, and he's trying to tap his toes so that he can get his sled moving straight on the straightaway, but it's at that point pretty hard until you get some pressure.
Yeah. There you're kind of floating across the top of the ice, and to control is very hard to come by. So 10 down, and it is a two-horse race. Martin Dukurs and Alexander Tretiakov. Everyone else is chasing Thomas Dukurs for the bronze medal. Are the audio levels just going up and down all the time in your ears? Mine are just going all the time. Program sound, and sometimes I can half hear John, and sometimes you can barely hear him at all. And it seems like every time there's a different input, it changes everything. Oh, hello. Are you allowed to do that in a race? Yeah, I hear you. Nope. Yeah, my audio levels are just going up and down like a yo-yo. You're pressing my talk back. It's only flashing on my panel, not on hers. Yeah, that was me. Can you hear John? No. She's not hearing you because it's only coming up on my side of the panel.
We can see on TV, volunteer. Use away.
Clear the track, please.
Ninth and final World Cup race of the skeleton men's season, and our 11th of 26 sliders is Ben Sanford, Martin Haven and Melissa Hollingsworth here watching the action with you from this new Olympic venue at Sochi in Russia. Melissa Hollingsworth, the start is so critical already, we've seen here.
It really is, and it's, yes, your push times, but how you navigate coming out of the spur. Watch Ben handles it very well. We did see in the break that the track workers were out there with the spur cutters. Now, whether they did some work, we're not sure. We don't know exactly what they're allowed to do. Jury can always make some calls if there's going to be some havocs of people coming out and ruining the race at the top.
But they did seem to be cutting the groove right at the block rather than at the dangerous end, which is the far end of it. So I'm not sure about that. Nice high line as he comes out of corner 7, picking up speed fast down this track.
Yes, Ben is a tall, heavy athlete, so he has that on his side, but you can definitely see the oscillations and how his body was reacting, and that's what this track feels like. It feels like the track really pushes against you, and you're fighting it on the way down. So these extra runs that we're having this year will help everybody out as we head into the Olympics.
Good speed down at the bottom. Top 3 speeds. He's in 9th place, though. Still nearly a second away, Ben Sanford. 11th quickest start. And again, that is going to be a real issue here in 12 months in the Winter Games. Whoever starts strongly is going to be very hard to catch. Well, that's always been a factor on most tracks, but here it seems to be a big factor.
It's that 3 pressure corner, corner 10, lots of height, crossing him into 11, which he's leaning away. He has a slight bump on the entrance, but it is going to set his sled and help get that height on the exit so he can get through that chicane into 14.
Well, the speed, 79, 80 miles an hour. That little crossover is just a few yards long. Next up, Don Parsons of Great Britain. I had lunch with him today, and he's feeling very relaxed going into this final race of the season. Looking forward to a big start. He's one of the quickest starters in the field, and that could really help him here.
Wow, and he hits the bottleneck. Look at all that snow come off.
And look how soft the ice is in the walls. Normally you'd get a few fragments. That's just a big handful of snow.
Yeah, and huge detriment on his speed, velocity heading from into corner 1. Oh, let's see if he can relax and at least gain some experience going down this Olympic track.
Well, the air temperature here is around 17, 18 degrees. The ice temperature hovering just perilously close to 0. So the ice is very soft in the walls. 125 kilometers an hour. Top speed there was 128.
Oh, man, you can hear the screeching. That was his visor just on the ice. So much pressure on this track.
Well, it doesn't have the extreme high speeds perhaps that the track at Whistler does, but it has plenty of challenges and plenty of pressure for the athletes to deal with. 58.43, and you can see how bitterly disappointed he is. And I wonder how many more athletes are going to swap to that left-hand groove that Kristen Bromley used, because this is what awaits them.
Yeah, and that is his forte, that start, a 466 start getaway, and he hits this wall on the front of his bumper, not even the side.
Look at it, destroys the wall. Now, the jury will take a look at that, because if that has removed enough ice and there's just concrete there, that is not going to be a good thing. Well, next up, Johnny Fairbert of Canada. Melissa Hollingsworth, your teammate. Again, looking to find some speed here. He's using the groove, but in a different way to a lot of the others.
Yeah, and it will have been communicated to John. Make sure that you're on that pressure on your left-hand side of your body to get away from the groove, and he's handling it really well, but they didn't even clean it up. He just went through a mound of snow. Now,
first of all, the track workers should know better, and secondly, how on earth can the jury allow debris like that to still be in the track and send the athletes off from the top? The jury are the people that are supposed to be teaching everybody here how the sport is run. It is their job to make sure. Now, presumably, he can then go back to the top and say, I want that again. Track wasn't clear.
Yeah, you can always put in a protest. We saw that in St. Moritz if you were running over tree branches where they were allowing athletes to take an extra run, and I think that's a very fair, case on John Fairbairn's part.
Well, which makes me think the jury haven't even looked at the wall. How can they not have seen it?
Well,
126.4 down at the bottom, not bad speed, 10th place finish, 57.86. I wonder if Duff Gibson is going to go and get on the radio and have a talk to John to see whether he thinks that there's any point at all in taking another trip, because what you do is you throw away the one that exists.
Exactly. Comes over, he bumps that wall going into 14. Here he is. Lots of pressure. It's going to cross him over, and that's what we saw Tretiakov doing, letting the sled go a little bit more. Maybe that's what we need to learn to get down this track faster.
Well, you talked about having to fight this track, and that's never going to be a good thing, is it? That's always going to be the slow way. So everybody's going to have to somehow get their head around it in a zen manner. Matt Antoine of the USA next. 27-year-old, still struggling to find the speed at the start that he always used to have after knee surgery during the year. And clock running as he gets ready to go from this left-hand groove.
Coaches might have had enough where they just gave him the call. You use that left groove. Kristen was finding it. It's pulling too.
And there is still ice all over that bottleneck, so it's now spread out. There's no way that you can't run over it. This is a very bizarre set of events, I've got to say. I'm not sure that I've seen that before.
There's a lot that we haven't seen this week, all being new coming to this wonderful venue.
This is very true. Again, climbing into corner 6, and the track comes up as the pressure takes you up, and then you drop down with the track on the exit.
You can see Matt was using some body English here. This 10, you actually go down onto the floor if you don't get that first pressure, which is a weird feeling as an athlete. You're used to sliding up on the walls, not down on the floor of the track.
Well, speed's at 80 miles an hour now, all the way down this lower part of the track, and you've got to keep that speed as you climb uphill here. A lot of the corners, because you go up the corner, look like they're uphill, but these genuinely are climbing uphill corners. 124.4 at the bottom, 77 miles an hour. 12th place for Matt. And this is going to be taking all the names outside of the top two and just tossing them up in the air. There's not going to be probably two clean runs from any of the sliders.
Uses the left groove. He's only the second athlete that we've seen use the left groove. Look at the height he has in corner 7. You do want height, but he had a little bit too much as he drops out into, this is 8, even though it's a straightaway, that's considered corner 8, heading into corner 9.
I was walking down the track a couple of days ago and Coach Tuffy was saying, yeah, that's 8. I said, no, that's a straight. I said, oh yeah, that's the invisible corner. Next up then is Ed Smith of Great Britain. 27 years old, electrician by trade from Bristol. His sled called Thor,
Attention, sled on track.
which it's going to be if it hits that wall again, goes through the ice.
470, 4th ranked start for Ed. That's very impressive.
Well, Don Parsons, 3rd quickest, but then he hit the wall head on. So this is good speed from Ed, 74.7. That is the 2nd quickest, 3rd quickest behind Dukurs and Tretiakov.
A little bit of a correction there as he's going uphill, and then that corner 6 drops away from him. Going into corner 9. Oh, a lot of height. That's the first time that we've been seeing that. That was something we were warned about in training all week, and that's the first slider we've seen drop out of that corner.
Well, Ed is losing a lot of speed. 123. He's 5 kilometers an hour slower than Tretiakov and Dukurs, 4 down on anyone else in the field. So something that he has chosen in the setup to either give him control or whatever is really not working in terms of straight line speed. And he is 14th, just in front of teammate Don Parsons. But that leaves them both perilously close to the danger zone that they might not get a second heat. And again, like his teammate, does not look overjoyed with that.
Oh, you can see 9, the pressure just gets away. He climbs so high, and there's actually air between his runners. That really sets him up poorly for corner 10, and that's where you're building all that speed that we're seeing.
Martin Dukurs of Latvia is our race leader. From Alexander Tretiakov, Thomas Dukurs, John Daly, Frank Rommel and John Montgomery may be the ones battling for the bronze medal. 16th of our 26 sliders. We have 5 places in the field and 11 sliders trying to take them all. So for Hiro Takahashi and everyone else in the rest of this first run, the pressure is on to try and make it into the top 20.
Attention, sled on track.
I'm Martin Haven, Melissa Hollingsworth sitting alongside me watching the start, and that was a pretty tidy run and good first corner momentum, 50.1 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, and we heard his toe drag on the ice. Everybody else has been trying to keep their toes off to maneuver their way through that bottleneck, but he decided to use a little bit of friction, so some risk, and had some great reward.
Well, 7th fastest at the start, 8th place at the moment. He'll be in the red behind Martin Dukurs, as will everybody else. And now again, like Ed Smith that we just saw, he is losing speed hard. He's gone down to 15th place.
Oh, and a big hit going into corner 11 there. Big hit going into 14.
It's an uncomfortable ride for the Japanese, and that will leave him dangerously close to the bottom of the pile. 123.1, slowest speed we have seen at the bottom of the track from anyone so far. He had nothing left to give. 58.64, that's a little bit of breathing space for the 2 British athletes who are 14th and 15th just in front of him.
That's one thing about this track. When you make one mistake, it's really hard to just get back on track and be comfortable because the pressures are so extreme as you're being ripped up to the roof. There's a big hit going into corner 11, I think that is, coming out of 10 and 11. It's not the first athlete that's done that today with the lines on the wall.
And probably won't be the last either. Yeah, the walls are scarring up a lot more than you might expect. Raphael Meyer now for Austria, one of the youngest athletes in the entire traveling circus here. Just 20 years old, from Rum, outside Innsbruck.
He's decided to use the left groove. This will be the 3rd athlete keeping a tally here to see.
Well, This is fascinating, isn't it? That everybody's learning day by day, run by run, almost athlete by athlete. You can learn almost as much by watching as you do by sliding.
And his sled was actually pulled to the left-hand side, so I'm unsure of exactly what's happening there. This track is completely covered, so it's not being affected by the sun, maybe melting and pulling sleds different directions.
Well, 16th at the start. He needs to try and find his way past Takahashi, maybe Don Parsons, Ed Smith if he can, to try and get himself a place in the second heat.
Low line from him, but he's getting quite a bit of height down on the floor in 10. That three-pressure corner hits the wall again into 11.
Yikes. And he gets that late exit as well. 12-13 and climbing up the hill once more. That's really a dramatic climb. It's odd to be walking down a bobsleigh track and then to start walking uphill 2 or 3 times. Well, at the line, he is in 15th place ahead of Don Parsons and Hiro Takahashi. And that gives him a little buffer to try and make the second heat. Well, Melissa Hollingsworth, what are you figuring now about where would you expect normally that you'd want to start? Well, let's take a look at this hit first.
That's into 11. Look at the snow fly, and that sets him up poorly for the exit. All the pressure. He didn't have enough height coming out of the exit, and it builds again. He's lucky he is taking that hit there, so it can set him up again for corner 14, just for safety purposes on that exit.
I bet that shoulder feels lucky. Lots of noise at the top of the track. That means the second of our 3 Russian athletes here, Anton Batuev. Here he is.
Normally we'd be seeing Chudinov racing, who was 3rd bronze medal at World Championships, but it's important that Anton races this race so that the Russians can claim back that 3rd spot for next year's World Cup Tour.
Well, Sergei Chudinov is here and he's watching at the top of the track, but it's Batuev who's doing the World Cup race. Again, he's got this very individual style. He never moves one leg for balance. It's always from the pelvis. He swings the whole of the lower part of his body.
Individual sport, there's lots of individual styles for sure when it comes to driving.
And there's a dozen ways to skin a cat in skeleton. That's not too many metaphors. Climbing into turn 6 and then dropping out on the exit. Big height in 7 again.
Yeah. Oh, and he was almost late going into 9, pulls it over and has a little bit too early of an entry.
Well, 15th fastest start, and this is one of the reasons that he's not been regularly on the World Cup. It's because he's just not as quick as Chudinov.
A little bump there coming out of 15. I would have thought he had higher speeds for sure at the bottom of the track, and 58, 13, and 13th place. I thought we'd see him higher up in the ranks.
Well, that may well be enough to get him into the second heat, and that's what this is all about. It's about trying to allow the Russians a 3rd place, because it works on how your nation's sliders are tallied up. Top 3 nations will get 3 athletes, and you can see there using his spikes to slow him down.
Do not have brakes on a skeleton sled, so we have interesting methods of stopping with our shoes on the ground or crashing into the mat.
Well, next up, Kyle Chess of the USA, 19th of our 26 starters for Kyle. Well, he's been in and out of the World Cup so far this season, a couple of times. Returning now for the final World Cup race of the year.
Now, it's important of how Kyle finishes on this track as well, because from what I understand, it is the Russians and the Americans really battling out for that 3rd spot for their team starting out next year.
The target then is to try and catch Anton Batuev, who is currently in 13th place. 4.84 starts, so he's right with Batuev, just 100th behind. Speeds are the same, but at the moment, he's in 15th place.
Things are quiet right now for Kyle. Leaning away from the wall, drops away, corner 6 for him.
He's had such an up and down season, 5th in the season opener at Lake Placid. Then the first race in Germany, Winterberg, he didn't make the cut, and he failed to make the cut on 2 other occasions, all at German tracks. 1:26.8, a little quicker than Batuev.
You can see his form started to break in corner 10. That shows how much pressure that these sliders are feeling as they're going through that 3-pressure corner.
Well, he is still behind the Russian at the moment, but now he's not. Now he's in 13th place. Better speed by 2 kilometers an hour than the Russian. Makes it up into 11th. I told you he was having an up-and-down season. Didn't slide in the World Championships in St. Moritz, so he's been away from the ice since Eagles, which was end of January, right? So, yeah, it's been a while since he's had a race, but that is a really top-draw effort from Kyle Tress, 11th spot.
Very impressive. He has an interesting start. 2 hands, moves to the 1 hand. Luckily, they deepened up the groove for him, make sure he didn't push out like Thomas.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Morgan. Love you. Miss you guys. See you soon.
Yeah, sure will. Everybody's got that date in their calendar circled when they leave. A lot of people out of here Sunday and Monday. Well, next up, 20th of our field of 26 starters, Matthias Guggenberg, ranked 19th in the World Cup. And best result of the season for Matthias Guggenberger is 10th place at Koenigsee in Bavaria. Well, it's such a warm day, Melissa, but the track is completely covered. It's very overcast. I can't see, I mean, there's no sun to affect the track, so hopefully the ambient temperature's not doing too much damage to it.
That was the cleanest that we've seen anybody go into corner 1, and again he decided to use that left-hand groove.
I'm predicting Melissa Hollingsworth looking hard at that left-hand groove tomorrow.
Oh, it'll change by tomorrow.
Yeah, oh yeah, everything changes by tomorrow. Well, now this could well end up being a good run from Matthias Guggenberg. I hadn't chatted to him today, actually, but I did think the last couple of days he was still looking a little bit tender. Remember, he hurt his back really badly with that kind of scorpion feet overhead finish to one of his runs in St. Moritz. Oh, a little high.
You can see he's just trying to navigate his way. This track is quite a bit faster for these sliders than what it's been in training. So again, the learning curve, everything that they're going to be taking in, it might not be about today's race, it will be about a year's time.
Yeah. Okay, 18th place, 58.40. There's not an awful lot of clear air if you go from 10th down to 18th. We're talking about a few hundreds here and there between the athletes, but the big gap is from 2nd to 3rd, which is getting on for half a second. And that's why all these guys look so much slower than Martins Dukurs and Alexander Tretiakov. You can see around the edge of the ice sheet there at the finish area, it's all dribbling away as water.
Goes into corner 7 there from 6. Gets some height on the exit, which is good, but it's a little bit late. And you can see his body working really hard to make sure that he's not going to tap the right-hand wall heading into corner 9.
Get the feeling that Matthias Guggenberg will be happy to see this season in his rearview mirror, not one of his best. Yuki Sasahara now of Japan, a relative newcomer to the World Cup. This is only his first World Cup race. He was 20th in the World Championships. Let's see what he can produce here. What's he got to try and challenge at the start? Well, now, he controlled that groove pretty well. 4.87 the start, just 19th fastest, though.
It's quiet. Have a look at the sliders' composures right now of how quiet they are on the sled. The form isn't breaking, and then all of a sudden they get into corners 5, 6, especially corner 10, and then you start to see the bodies working and fighting against the track. Not as much height, but comes out clean, going into corner 9. Low lines. You can see his head is shaking, it's rattling off the ice. Bit of a skid going into corner 14, and he hits on the right side, which puts him high in 15. And that uphill section gets really difficult to straighten that out before the finish.
Well, he was 19th at the start, but he's drifted away to 21st place, so he will not get a second World Cup heat. 58.65 for Yuki Sasahara. 28-year-old from Nagano, works on the family farm.
It was 1/100th that he fell behind his teammate to not get a second run.
Yeah, that's very tough. And again, we had that in the World Championships. One Japanese knocking out the other.
Comes out of 11, bit of a skid, hits the wall with his back bumper. Into 14, his body, his elbows are out. Comes out too early, and he's set up to hit the right wall in the uphill section. Lots of friction.
So Yuki is out of the race. Martin Dukurs is our race leader from Alexander Tretiakov. 21 of our 26 athletes have come down. For the remaining 5, still trying to find a place in the top 20. This is the pressure that Lukas Kummer has faced almost all season.
A great starter. We've seen him up in the top 5 consistently in his starts.
Again, 4:74.7 fastest. If he can just hang on to that speed, and he's got great first corner momentum, 50.1. Only 3 other sliders have been over 49 kilometers an hour there.
Lukas is just coming back from World Championships on his home track in St. Moritz. Had great result there, so big confidence heading into his preparations here in Sochi.
And Eagles Austria was only the 2nd time this season, the race before St. Moritz, that he actually made the top 20. He got 13th there, which is a big boost. So peaking at the right time. 1:24.8 is not great speed, though. He's dropped out from 7th at the start to 21st now. And he's not going to make the top 20 cut. Hits the wall.
High line in 15, bump out of 15.
Comes through this big, long corner to the finish line, and a 58.98. He just cannot hold on to the speed at the start. And that's been the story of this season. He's always had the quick starts, Melissa, and so often not been able to keep that speed alive to the bottom of the track.
Yeah, and that's just learning. You can see his lines here. He's got too much pressure on the exit of 11 as he goes through this chicane, and to make sure you have that high line late so that you can swoop out and stay on that right-hand side. And everybody's still learning, and we haven't had the opportunity to watch a lot of sleds go down to see the exact lines.
Well, Lukas Kummer fails to make the cut. His teammate now, Michael Hoefer, has the opportunity to try and break into the top 20.
He's choosing to use the left groove, just like Lukas.
Well, now he's not got the speed of Lukas Kummer at the start, but he's a much bigger, heavier athlete, and that might help him keep his speed alive. 4.9, only the 23rd fastest starter. And Melissa, where you start so much dictates where you're likely to finish here.
It is. It's a tough battle for sure, because everybody has pretty much the same lines down the track. That's what it feels like and looks like. Going in a 7, you need that high line to get out so that you're not on the right-hand wall. Oh, and he just bumps. That's the tricky part. Maybe that's why they call that corner 8, because there's many hits on that wall.
Yeah, there actually is some contact.
Late into 14, but clean into 15. Those are nice lines. Those are things to build on for next year.
Climbs over the track outrun, and then this long looping final pair of corners, 16 and 17. You come under corner 15 there just after you finish, and then this long slide up to this finish area. 23rd place, though, I'm afraid, for Michael Hoefer. So he did not upset the form book, and he will not get a second slide here either. And that is the end of his regular season.
That's that part where in corner 10, you dip down right onto the floor, flat, and then abruptly back into that second oscillation. And it is a weird feeling as a slider to go flat onto a floor.
Michael Hoefer, like teammate Lukas Kummer, not making the cut here. What about Ander Mirambel? He turns 30 on Sunday. He rather foolishly let that slip out of the bag at the start area earlier on, and all of the guys around him were going, aha, that's the end of season party. It is going to be a dreadful first day of his 30s when he wakes up after that, I think. But let's see if he can put the final race to bed and break into the top 20.
Attention, sled on track.
He's still 29-year-old from Barcelona, a 4.82 start. That might be enough if he can have a good trip down to get him into this second heat.
It's the first one that I've seen have a skid between corners 1 and 2, and that might be the choice of equipment, or just maybe he's not quite set on his sled, his balance point, because you do see him skidding around just a little bit here, late in the corner 6.
But again, because of the ice conditions, the temperature, the uncertainty of what you really need for this track, maybe some people have got slightly left field choices. 122.3 is not great speed, and he's dropped from 17th already to 24th place. So I'm afraid this is how the season is going to finish. This will be his last slide, unless he goes to the US, which I think is unlikely, to do the final America's Cup race of the year. 120.7. We have not seen a speed as low as that at the bottom, so whatever he chose in setup, it did not help him. 59.88 for Ander Marambel, and no second heat for him.
Come on, the Raging Bull.
Well, he was the Raging Bull at the start. Try to get as much power into the sled as possible, Melissa Hollingsworth.
Yes, all of your efforts have to be going forward. Anytime you're sideways, then obviously you risk popping that groove, popping out of it. Corner 7, he has some height, but it's a little bit late. You'd like to see the sleds high before that number on the corner.
And that is that for the season for Ander Marambel. Alexandros Kefalas now for Greece. We're talking about potential summery venues for winter games, what with the ambient temperatures being very definitely t-shirt weather here. In fact, a number of the women's athletes were out sunbathing this morning, which you don't often get. And he said, well, maybe we should have a track in Greece. You can go skiing in Greece.
Chose to use the left-hand groove. He's now the 7th slider to use the groove on the left-hand side. And it's pulling to the left. We've seen it pull to the right. He ends up going a little bit late into corner 1 because of that.
Not bad momentum, though. 49.1 kilometers an hour, 74.1 as well. 25th at the start, though. Now he's picked up a spot ahead of Ander Marambel, 24th place.
Skid going into 6. You could see his legs kind of fishtailing behind him. He's trying to get his sled going straight again. Here's toes on the ice. High line through the exit of 9. Not as high as Ed.
He's getting closer. 22nd place. 122.7 kilometers an hour. It's Hiro Takahashi in 20th at the moment. Now he's drifted away again. 23rd position at the split, and you can see him struggling to get the position right between the corners there. 124 kilometers an hour is not going to be enough. Close, but he's behind the 2 Japanese, not in front where he needed to be. So that again is the end of a season for our Greek athlete Alexandros Kefalas.
Has some height here on corner 9, but we're not seeing any air between his runners. Head and shoulders up pretty high, catching a lot of wind. Comes out of 11, drifts back. You can see his body is trying to get back into corner 14 early with that height.
Well, next step for him will be to head back home to Chamfer in Switzerland, where he lives, just outside St-Moritz. That is close to the track as you can get. And our final and 26th slider is Giovanni Molosano of Italy. Let's see if he can find something special to break into that top 20. Giovanni has only made the cut once this season. That was the first race of the year, and that is probably not going to help him here.
No, he did not hit it as hard as what Dom did from Great Britain on the front, but you could see his sled was picked up on the side of it. And then he actually created some oscillations in corner 1 because of how late he went in.
Well, he's still got decent speed. He was 9th fastest starter, but already down to 24th place. Now, can he rescue anything from this? He's another one of those tall athletes, not when he stood next to Ben Sanford, but when he stood next to anybody else, he really looks like a tall guy. Apparently he holds the record for most photographs taken with the volunteers here as well, who are almost uniquely female.
Having a bit of a rough ride in that uphill section.
Certainly been having a better time with the volunteers than he is with the track itself. 120.2, slowest speed at the final trap, and that is it. 25th place for him. He is in front of Ander Marambel by a few hundredths of a second, but not close to making the cut. So 59.59 for a 25th place finish, and well, not quite the pinball wizard, but he certainly hit a few bits of ice.
Hitting the wall twice in that uphill section is going to slow you down quite a bit.
That's tantamount to just throwing the brakes on, isn't it? He hit the wall like that. So our race is being led by Martin Dukurs. So often we have said that. He has won so far 7 of the World Cup races this season. Silver medal behind Frank Rommel in Whistler. And he took the silver medal behind Alexander Tretiakov in St. Moritz in the World Championships. He is 1 run away from €100,000. If he can hold on to this win, he will take the FIBT Triple Trophy and the jackpot prize that goes with it of 100 grand. He is a minute of ice time away. No pressure, though. Well, Melissa Hollingsworth, here is the standings, and as we expected, it is Martin Dukurs versus Alexander Tretiakov. Everybody else is looking for scraps from the table, I guess.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to watching Thomas on his second run improve that start time, because he popped out, and maybe he can move up just a little bit more.
Well, there's a few athletes that have got a lot to prove. Going down towards the bottom of the top 20, the final sliders. Don Parsons does get in despite that big hit at the start, and Hiro Takahashi in 20th place will be the man who is the cut-off point. Not making the cut are Yuki Sasahara and Alexandros Kefalas, Lucas Kummer, Mikael Herfer, Giovanni Molisano and Ander Mirambel. Well, join us for the final race of the Men's Skeleton World Cup from the Sankey Sliding Center here in Sochi, Russia. Can the man who has dominated the season take the biggest prize in skeleton? There's only one way to find out. We'll see you for Heat 2.